How do I know that there's algae in my fuel tank? So I get this question a lot, and I've decided that maybe an investigation into the most basic fundamental principles of pulling an old Mercedes diesel out of long-term storage and putting it back on the road might be a good idea. And so one of the things that I get a lot of questions about from time to time is this question about why or how do I know if there's algae in the fuel tank? And so let's talk about it. So let's say you have this old Mercedes 300D that you put back on the road that's been parked for 5, 10, 15 years. And everything seems okay at first. The car runs well. It seems like it's doing really good. It seems like it has all the power it needs. But when you get out on the road after driving for, say, a day or two or a week or a month, the car starts to bog down ever so slightly. And the bogging gets worse and worse and worse until the car just really won't get out of its own way. Maybe it runs roughly, maybe it doesn't start as well. And so this might be a good time to check for algae. So if you look in the little inline fuel filter that supplies the primer pump, you're going to see maybe black or green or brown flakes. Now brown is usually rust, but brown or green sludgy stuff or little black specks are usually the remains of algae. And if you have a lot of this stuff and it doesn't seem to want to filter out, that's when you pull the tank and you clean it. Now sometimes it'll resolve itself. But in a car that's been sitting for a long time or you really don't know how good the fuel tank is, it's a good idea to pull the tank and clean it. So the next question that I get is, can the algae particles make it upstream? And the quick answer is yes. I remember one time we had a 75 300D come here where the canister type fuel filter that was used on 115 series and earlier diesels had algae inside it, and the algae had coated the walls of the main filter element and had kept fuel from passing through to the engine. So long story short, don't rule out a blocked main filter either. This lesson took me years to learn. Now, if you're seeing algae in these two filters, where else do you look? Well, you look at the fuel strainer. The fuel strainer is really not a fun thing to get to. You should be as low on fuel as possible. I mean, if you go in there, make sure your reserve light is on and that it's actually accurate, because if not, you're going to just take a bath in diesel. And I've bathed in diesel many times, and if somebody told me, hey Pierre, today's going to be the last day that you get to take a diesel bath, I would be ecstatic. It would be a day worth celebrating. But unfortunately, people show up here with fuel tank strainer issues and full tanks of diesel, so nothing ever goes the way we want it to. But your tank strainer should be investigated for algae. Now, sometimes the algae will just coat the fuel tank strainer screen, block everything up, you change the tank strainer or clean it and put a new O-ring in and you're good to go. Sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes it keeps pulling algae, but nonetheless, if you have algae in the tank, you need to pull the tank strainer or pull the tank. Figure one out. Now, where else can the algae be hiding? How about in the fuel cylinder? You know, in a previous video I showed taking the fuel cylinder apart, but this is also a great place to look for living algae colonies because they like tight, dark spaces. It's sort of like finding roaches in a dirty bathroom in a trailer, you know, or finding a snake somewhere hiding in the grass. You know, algae is just an organism that lives in cool, dark, wet, diesel-y places. And so if you can get the algae out of your tank strainer, it'll probably work better. And sometimes there's another clue too, because one of algae's cellular respiration byproducts is water, because it's a plant. You're going to find rust. So rust and algae often coexist together. What does this mean? It means that there's going to be algae in the bottom and often rust on the top of the sides of the tank. So if you want to get the rust out of your tank, you want to go around with like a small rubber mallet and hit the sides of the tank just to jar any rust that's loose. And that's the probably the easiest way to deal with that problem. Okay, so let's look at two more scenarios here where I think we need to examine the quality of the tank or the fuel lines. Now on 300 TD wagons, And other cars with a flat fuel tank like a 220D or 240D 115 series car, you need to check the fuel line in the bottom of the tank, the basement line, for algae. Algae will hang out there, and it may not be in the rest of the tank, but it could be in that line. Second of all, sometimes on the 601 to 606 engines, and occasionally on the 616 and 617 engines, the later style canister fuel filters will implode internally, blocking or reducing fuel flow, and people will think, oh, I've got algae in the tank, oh, I got to pull and clean the tank. No, it could be a blocked fuel filter too. So the fuel filters do occasionally implode, causing the same sensation, so don't rule that sensation out. And sometimes in the 601 all the way up to 603 engines, the fuel filter housings develop a minute air leak. Don't ask me how this happens, but a filter doesn't even fix it, and I end up having to pull the tank out and put a thing inside, and a new fuel, I end up pulling the fuel tank and not really finding any evidence there. I end up having to change the filter housing at the end of the day. So this has happened to me a few times. Anyway, if you liked this video and thought it was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Please leave us a thumbs up. And please tap the bell for notifications so you can get access to our videos. If you've supported us in Patreon, we really appreciate it. And in the meantime, enjoy driving your Mercedes Benz and leave your comments below with your own algae story. Thank you so much.